welcome to your custom deep dive.
Glad to be here.
You handed us your study notes, your mock exams, and, well, your textbooks.
A lot of textbooks.
Seriously, so many. And our mission today is to really tear down the exact mechanics of Domain B.
Specifically, task list item B.15.
Right. Identify examples of response generalization.
Which is such a critical topic.
It really is. I mean, if you were sitting for the BCBA exam, this is honestly one of those concepts that it seems deceptively simple when you just look at it on a flashcard.
Oh, absolutely.
But it can completely wreck your score on a scenario-based multiple choice question.
It's a trap for a lot of students because it goes so far beyond just, passing the exam.
Right.
Understanding this is literally the difference between writing a behavior program that creates a rigid, kind of robotic client and writing a program that fosters genuine, adaptable human independence.
Okay, so to get us in the right headspace for this, I want you to imagine for a second that you decide to learn how to speak in a completely new high society environment.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
You study hard, you put in the hours, but there is this massive catch.
What's the catch?
Your instructor decrees that you are only ever allowed to use exactly one specific sentence to ask for food.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. You can only say, "I formally request nutritional sustenance."
Wow. Just that one phrase.
That is it. If you want a slice of pizza from a street vendor.
I formally request nutritional sustenance.
Exactly. A 5-course meal at a Michelin star restaurant. Same sentence.
Yeah.
A scoop of ice cream. Same exact sentence.
Which, that would be an incredibly limiting way to navigate the world.
Very limiting.
Technically, yes, you would get fed, so the basic function of your behavior is met.
Right, the payoff is there.
But you would sound completely robotic, and you'd have absolutely zero flexibility to adapt to the natural environment.
None at all.
Like if you walked into a casual cafe and used that highly formal, rigid phrase, you'd probably get a few strange looks.
You'd clear the room.
Yeah, the social reinforcement just wouldn't be quite right.
Exactly. And that rigid, single-sentence scenario is exactly what we are trying to avoid in clinical practice.
100%.
Which really brings us to the core of B.15, right? Response generalization.
Let's get into it.
At its most fundamental level, response generalization is the degree to which a learner emits untrained responses that are functionally equivalent to the trained target behavior.
The vocabulary here is everything. Like, as a future BCBA, you really need to look at this through the lens of topography versus function.
Topography versus function.
Right, the topography of the behavior, so what it physically looks like or sounds like is changing.
Okay.
But the function, like the payoff or the specific reinforcement the learner contacts at the end of the sequence,
that stays the same.
It remains completely identical. And honestly, the most critical word in that entire textbook definition is untrained.
Untrained, because we didn't teach it.
Exactly. The learner is doing something you never explicitly programmed them to do.
Okay, let's unpack this mechanism a bit, because I want to make sure the why and the how are crystal clear before we get into the heavy clinical example.
That's a good idea.
I always, I visualize response generalization like water flowing down a mountain.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, so the rain hitting the top of the mountain, that's your stimulus.
Okay.
The lake at the very bottom of the mountain is your reinforcement. It's the function. It's where the water desperately wants to go.
Right, the ultimate goal.
Now, as the clinician, you dig one specific, highly structured trench to guide that water down to the lake.
And that trench is your trained behavior.
Exactly. That is the trained behavior.
And, if everything goes perfectly, the water flows right down that single trench.
Move sailing.
But behavioral science tells us that environments are rarely perfect.
Very rarely.
So what happens when that trench gets blocked? Let's say the specific reinforcer isn't immediately available, or maybe the environment shifts just slightly.
Well, the water doesn't just stop.
No, it doesn't.
It's fluid. It spills over the edges. It starts, carving new grooves in the dirt.
Finding a new way.
Yeah, suddenly the water is taking dozens of different totally novel paths down the mountain to reach that exact same lake.
The mountain hasn't changed.
Nope.
The lake hasn't changed, but the paths to get there have multiplied.
That's it. Exactly.
That is actually a phenomenal way to visualize what we call extinction-induced variability.
Extinction-induced variability. That's a mouthful.
It is, but it makes sense when you break it down. When that initial trench or the trained behavior meets a slight roadblock.
Like a temporary state of extinction.
Right. The learner doesn't just power down like a robot.
Yep.
They experience behavioral variability.
They start trying new things.
They start experimenting with new topographies to see what else might work to access that lake.
Which is the reinforcer.
Exactly. Through a process called response induction, which, by the way, is practically synonymous with response generalization, the learner realizes that an entire response class exists.
Meaning there's more than one way to get the exact same outcome.
Precisely.
Let's look at how this plays out in normal, everyday development, because, honestly, we all do this constantly.
We do. Every single day.
Think about language acquisition. A toddler is explicitly taught by their parents to point at a big flying metal tube in the sky and say the word plane.
A classic first word.
Right. They say plane, the parents clap, they get that social reinforcement.
The trench is dug.
But later, without anyone sitting them down with flashcards, that kid looks up and spontaneously says airplane.
Or aircraft.
Or airliner.
Right. The antecedent stimulus is identical. The flying object.
Same mountain.
The reinforcing consequence is identical. The parent's attention.
Same lake.
But the topography of the verbal behavior generalized. They emitted a brand new, untrained response.
It's so cool when you actually look out for it.
We see this with social greetings all the time, too. Like, you might run a social skills group where a client is explicitly taught to make eye contact, extend their hand, and say, pleased to make your acquaintance.
Which, you know, is great for a highly formal setting.
Sure, maybe a job interview.
But if they walk up to a peer on the playground and deliver that line, the social interaction might completely stall out.
It would probably be super awkward.
Extremely.
But through natural contingencies and response generalization, that client might eventually see a peer, which is the same stimulus, and spontaneously say, what's up?
Or just give a quick head nod.
Exactly. The function is the exact same. They're acknowledging the presence of another person and initiating an interaction.
But the topography has adapted to be much more efficient. And socially valid.
Right.
There's another great everyday example from the sources about a kid named Xander navigating technology.
Oh, the phone example.
Yes. So Xander is explicitly taught how to call his mom. The trained behavior is physically dialing her 10-digit phone number on a keypad. He punches the numbers, the phone rings, mom answers. That is the trench we dug for him.
Makes sense.
But later, without any direct instruction from a BCBA or a parent, Xander opens the Contacts app on a smartphone, scrolls down to her picture, and just taps her name to call her.
Which is a brilliant demonstration of a robust response class.
It really is.
Because think about the motor movements involved there. Punching 10 distinct digits on a grid requires a completely different physical topography than swiping a touchscreen and tapping a photo.
They look absolutely nothing alike.
No, they don't. But they're functionally equivalent. Getting mom on the line is the reinforcer.
So why is this the holy grail for a behavior analyst? Because reading through the literature, it seems like if we don't have response generalization, our entire field kind of just falls apart.
It absolutely does fall apart.
Wow.
If we only ever teach that one single trench, that one rigid topography, the client is forced to rely entirely on rote memorization.
They become inflexible.
Highly inflexible. The moment they encounter a phone without a physical keypad, Xander can't call his mom.
Oh, right. Because he only knows the buttons.
Exactly. And we cannot possibly write a discrete trial program for every single microbehavior a human being will need over the course of their life.
There just isn't enough time in the world.
Not even close.
We want them to generate the behaviors themselves. You know, generative learning.
Generative learning is the key. Expanding a behavior class is the ultimate goal of clinical intervention. We want clients to have this massive, overflowing toolkit of responses for any given situation, rather than relying on a single, fragile tool.
Let's look at a clinical example of this, because I think it helps cement it.
Let's do it.
Say you have a client and you're running a name-writing program.
Classic skill acquisition.
Right. You do the prompting, the fading, the reinforcement, and eventually the client masters writing their name in basic standard print. But then, a few weeks later, you check their worksheet, and through response generalization, they have spontaneously started writing their name in cursive.
Or maybe they're using big block letters.
Or, my personal favorite, they've drawn their name in elaborate bubble letters.
Kids love the bubble letters.
They do.
And notice the function here. Whether it is standard print cursive, or bubble letters, all of those novel typographies serve the exact same function.
Which is providing their identifying information on a piece of paper for the teacher.
Right. You didn't teach the bubble letters.
Yeah.
The client generated them.
And this is literally life-changing when we talk about functional communication training, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Say a client is taught to let an adult know they want an item that is out of reach. Initially, the strict, trained typography is handing over a specific picture exchange card.
Right. Handing over the card gets the item.
But over time, they start pulling the adult's hand toward the shelves.
Okay.
Or they start pointing at the item, or vocalizing the word mine.
And as a clinician, you want to celebrate that.
You do.
Oh, completely. That variety is the hallmark of a healthy behavioral repertoire.
Because what happens if the picture card goes missing?
Exactly. If they don't have response generalization, that blocked trench leads straight to frustration.
And frustration often manifests as severe problem behavior.
Right. But if they have multiple ways to request an item, they simply swap to a different typography, and the problem behavior is bypassed entirely.
Okay, this all makes perfect sense in theory. But I want to shift gears here and step onto the BCBA exam battlefield.
The exam.
Yeah, because the test makers know that students understand this conceptually. They aren't going to give you a simple definition question.
Never.
They're going to put you in a paragraph-long scenario. The timer is going to be ticking down, you're exhausted, and they're going to try to trap you.
And the most common trap, without a doubt, the one that routinely sabotages test scores, is confusing response generalization with stimulus generalization.
They sound so similar.
They both use the word generalization,
right,
but they represent fundamentally inverse behavioral processes.
So let's break this down meticulously for the listeners.
Please do.
Stimulus generalization is when you have one specific response topography that occurs across multiple novel stimuli.
Right. One behavior, many triggers.
Think of a toddler named Amy from the source material. Amy learns to look at her dad, who has a big bushy beard, and emit the vocal response. Dada.
Okay, one typography.
One typography. But then she goes to the grocery store, she sees a totally different man with a beard, which is a brand new stimulus, and she emits the exact same response. Dada.
She sees the mailman with a beard. Dada.
Right.
She sees a historical photo of Abraham Lincoln. Dada.
Still dada.
The response topography never ever changes. It is rigidly locked in as data.
Okay, so what is generalizing then?
What is generalizing, what is expanding, is the class of stimuli that trigger that response. The physical environment is changing, but her behavior is not.
Or take a kid named Carlos. Carlos learns the manual sign for more to get extra snacks at the table. He then goes to the playroom and uses the exact same manual sign more to get extra time with his toys.
The response topography is identical.
Identical. The snacks versus the toys are what changed.
That is stimulus generalization.
Now hold that in your mind and contrast it with response generalization, which is our target today.
Right. Back to B.15.
This is multiple novel response topographies emitted in the presence of one single stimulus.
The environment stays the same, the trigger stays the same, but the behavior itself morphs.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and I want to put myself in the hot seat for a second.
Right, let's do it.
Let's say I'm taking the exam. I'm staring at a massive, convoluted scenario on the screen. The setting is changing, the people are changing, the behavior looks like it might be changing.
It's overwhelming.
Super overwhelming. What is the absolute fastest, foolproof heuristic I can use to strip away the distractors and find the right answer?
Okay, when you are lost in a paragraph-long scenario, you need to anchor yourself to one simple question.
Which is?
What is changing?
What is changing? Okay.
Look strictly at the mechanics of the scenario. Is the physical environment changing?
Okay.
Is the person delivering the instruction changing? Is the object they are interacting with changing?
So, the setting or the trigger?
Right. If the setting or the trigger is what is expanding, but the learner is doing the exact same physical movement or saying the exact same word, you are looking at stimulus generalization.
Because the stimulus is the variable that changed.
Exactly. But if you read the scenario and the antecedent is exactly the same classroom, the same teacher, the same instruction.
Everything's the same.
But the learner is suddenly doing a brand new behavior to get the same reinforcer. That is response generalization. The response topography is what changed.
Let me test this because I really want to see if I can trip myself up here.
Go for it.
I'm reading a mock exam question. Marcus is taught to independently man for a break by handing a red break card to his teacher while sitting at his desk in the classroom.
Okay, got the baseline.
The next day, in the exact same classroom, sitting at the exact same desk with the exact same teacher, he feels overwhelmed. Instead of handing the red card, he reaches out, taps his teacher's shoulder, and vocally says, "I need a minute." He has never been explicitly taught to do this.
Okay, walk me through your heuristic. What is changing?
Well, initially I might panic because tapping a shoulder and talking feels like a totally different scenario.
Right, it feels different.
But applying the rule, the environment is the same desk. The teacher is the same. The antecedent feeling overwhelmed and needing a break is the same.
Correct.
None of the stimuli changed. What changed was the topography. He went from handing a physical card to a motor action of tapping and a vocalization.
And so?
The response changed?
Yeah.
So, response generalization.
Spot on. You isolated the variables.
Wow, that actually makes it really simple.
The test makers will try to bury that simple mechanic in like 5 sentences of backstory about Marcus's mood or the color of the desk.
They love the backstory.
Just ignore the noise. If the response changes, it's response generalization. If the stimulus changes, it's stimulus generalization.
That is going to save someone a lot of anxiety on test day.
I hope so.
But let's pivot for a minute, because as much as we are praising response generalization as the ultimate goal of clinical programming, it isn't always a victory, is it?
No, it's not.
We really need to talk about the dark side of this concept.
We do, and it is a very real clinical dilemma known as undesirable response generalization.
Undesirable.
Yeah. We just established that the learner is naturally going to generate novel behaviors to achieve a function.
Right.
But the harsh reality is that sometimes those novel behaviors, while technically functionally equivalent, are highly problematic.
Problematic how?
Well, they might be socially invalid, highly inefficient, or in some cases, catastrophic safety hazards.
There's a vetted example of this in the materials regarding social validity. Imagine a teenager named Tracy.
Oh, the landscaping example.
Yes. So Tracy is hired by her brother, who runs a professional landscaping business, to help out.
Okay.
She is explicitly trained to mow a client's lawn in straight, overlapping, parallel lines. Up and down, nice and neat.
The trained topography.
Exactly. But through response generalization, Tracy figures out, hey, I can also mow this lawn by starting in the middle and going in continuous expanding circles, creating concentric rings.
Now, analyze the function there. Did she achieve the reinforcement?
Yes. The grass is cut.
Right. The physical function of the behavior was entirely successful.
But socially?
Socially, it is a disaster. Her brother's clients are paying for a manicured lawn, and they are going to be furious that their front yard looks like an alien crop circle.
Seriously?
The topography of the behavior generalized in a way that violates the social contingencies of the environment.
It's just not what people expect.
Exactly.
But it gets much more serious than just an angry landscaping client. Think about industrial safety.
Ouch.
Yeah, Jack. Say you have a factory worker named Jack. Jack is explicitly trained to operate a heavy-duty hydraulic drill press.
Serious machinery.
The safety protocol dictates that he must pull the lever down using both hands simultaneously. That is the trained topography.
But human behavior naturally drifts toward efficiency.
We always want the easier way.
Exactly. Jack, through response induction, realizes that the machine only actually requires the physical force of one arm to pull the lever.
Oh.
So he starts operating this heavy machinery with just his right hand, leaving his left hand free to hold his coffee or, adjust his safety glasses.
Which, again, achieves the function. The drill comes down, the metal part is manufactured, it is technically functionally equivalent.
It is functionally equivalent, but it is incredibly dangerous.
Right.
He has just created a massive safety hazard on the factory floor because his free hand could easily get caught in the press.
That's terrifying.
His untrained response could cost him a limb. And this is why, as a BCBA, you cannot just write a skill acquisition program, train the initial behavior, and walk away.
You can't just set it and forget it.
No. You have to actively monitor the generalization process.
So, if you are consulting on Jack's factory floor or you were Tracy's supervisor, how do you actually manage that? You can't just turn off their ability to generalize.
No, and you wouldn't want to. You have to utilize differential reinforcement.
Okay, how does that work here?
As the learner starts to naturally experiment and emit these new topographies, you must be there to actively differentially reinforce the appropriate, safe, socially valid variations.
The good ones.
Right. And simultaneously, you must place the dangerous, inefficient, or inappropriate variations on extinction.
Just ignore them or block them.
Exactly. Or, in Jack's case, where safety is immediately compromised, you might need to implement a punishment procedure or a strict reprimand.
So you are basically pruning a tree.
I love that.
The behavior class branches out naturally. That is the response generalization, the tree growing. But you, as the clinician, have to trim back the branches that are growing toward the power lines.
While making sure you water the branches that are growing healthy and strong.
Exactly.
That is a perfect conceptualization. You desperately want the flexibility and the growth, but it must be bound by the realities of safety and social validity.
Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, this actually raises a really profound question.
Let's hear it.
And it's something I'm going to leave you, the listener, to mull over as you close your textbooks and take a breather today.
Okay.
If response generalization literally means that a human learner is naturally generating brand new, novel behaviors that no one ever explicitly taught them, at what point does our clinical programming end and their natural human creativity begin?
Wow. It forces you to look at behavior analysis not just as a mechanical system of inputs and outputs, but as the underlying architecture of human potential.
Think about it. If you sit a kid down and explicitly teach them 3 basic piano chords, that is the trained, rigid topography.
Yeah.
But a year later, that kid starts combining those chords in novel ways, varying the rhythm, adding a vocal melody, and suddenly they've written a completely original song.
They achieve the function of making music, but the topography is entirely novel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is human creativity at its very core just a massive, unfathomably complex web of response generalization? Are we all just taking the rigid sentences we were taught and finding beautiful, untrained ways to ask for food?
It is a phenomenal way to frame the science. You aren't just memorizing terms for a multiple choice test. You are learning the literal mechanics of how human beings adapt, create, and thrive in a complex world.
Absolutely. And we want to invite you to continue mastering those mechanics by sticking right here with the Behavioral Intelligence Guide Mara Sánchez BCBA study series.
There is an entire task list left to uncover. And mastering these foundational concepts is critical not just to passing your exam, but to changing lives in your future practice.
Make sure you follow and reach out to Amethyst Therapy Services for more incredible exam prep resources, mock questions, and clinical insights. You can find everything you need on the web at www.amethysttherapyservices.com.
Or drop them an email directly at info@amethysttherapyservices.com.
Keep studying, keep asking the big questions, and remember, mastering this exam is just a deep dive away.